Nietzsche. How to become who you are. To truly grasp Nietzsche's maxim, "Become what you are," one must first abandon the comforting, pervasive myth that the self is a static, pre-existing artifact, waiting patiently to be discovered like a buried treasure. This common interpretation domesticates Nietzsche's radical challenge, reducing it to a gentle journey of self-discovery or a vocational quest. Nietzsche, however, insists that the self is not a noun, but a verb, a continuous, brutal, and glorious act of creation. Becoming who you are is less about excavating a fixed identity and infinitely more about architecting a destiny, often on the ruins of the self you inherited and the values you unconsciously absorbed. The ultimate goal is not conformity to an ideal, but the relentless, self-willed ascent towards a greater, self-legislated self, a process he calls Selbstüberwindung, or self-overcoming. The fundamental task, as Nietzsche outlines through his parable of the three metamorphoses, begins not with creation, but with a necessary destruction. The first stage is the spirit of the camel, the creature that dutifully accepts the heaviest burdens of societal expectation, inherited morality, and dogmatic thou shalts. This is the spirit that is weighed down by 1,000 years of cultural history, internalized shame, the comforting but crippling illusion of objective truth, and the stifling weight of custom. Most lives stall here, mistaking the endurance of these burdens for genuine character or strength of will. The path to becoming oneself demands a solitary retreat into the desert, where these inherited values are not simply abandoned, but consciously taken on, rigorously tested for their life-affirming properties, and ultimately deemed unworthy of the self-creator's project. This is a task of profound intellectual honesty, recognizing that many of the truths we hold dear are merely the prejudices of our lineage. The metamorphosis yields the lion, the spirit that is capable of the sacred no. This is not the petty rebellion of a frustrated adolescent. It is the philosophical and moral insurrection against the great dragon labeled thou shalt. The lion's work is to demolish the external authorities, the state, the church, the mass consensus, and the spirit of gravity, the force that oppresses us with the feeling of weight and duty, that have dictated the terms of the self. This spirit fights for the right to establish its own values. Crucially, the lion must wrestle with the concept of nihilism that results from this destruction. When one successfully kills God and shatters the old tablets of values, one is left not immediately with freedom, but with a terrifying void. The external meaning that previously anchored life is gone. Most who reach this stage collapse into despair, cynicism, or destructive relativism, having mistaken destruction for the final goal. The true Nietzschean task is to endure this void and use its emptiness as the canvas for radical, affirmative self-legislation. This endurance is intimately linked to the profound, difficult wisdom of amor fati, or the love of fate, which is perhaps the most critical tool for the self-creator. To become who you are is to make peace with and enthusiastically affirm every detail of your past, not despite the pain, the failures, and the absurdities, but because of them. The self you are creating is not a future perfect vision separated from your flawed history. It is the necessary, integrated product of that history. Amor fati transforms all the "it was" into a joyous "thus I willed it." This act of supreme self-acceptance and affirmation cuts the root of resentment, which Nietzsche viewed as the most corrosive agent against the soul. If you resent any part of your past, you resent the materials and the process that made your present self possible. The self-creator must be capable of willing his own necessity, recognizing that every error and every sorrow was a crucial chisel blow in the sculpting of the self that affirms life. The ultimate test for the person striving to become who you are is provided by the concept of the eternal recurrence. Imagine, a demon visits you in your loneliest solitude and tells you that you will have to live this life, every joy, every pain, every fleeting thought, every unspoken word, infinitely many times, in perfect repetition. The question is, would you not only endure this news, but would you rejoice? The power of this thought experiment is not its cosmological likelihood, but its power as a supreme selective standard for life affirmation. Most philosophies ask how to live a life that leads to a desirable afterlife or a state of cosmic peace. Nietzsche asks how to live a life that you would desire to live again and again for all eternity. The response to the eternal recurrence is the measure of your success as a self-creator. The person who screams yes to the recurrence has achieved the highest form of self-legislation and affirmation, having essentially justified their entire existence and declared themselves the author of a masterpiece they cherish absolutely. They have become their own fate and their own necessity.